Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today we'll be looking at some very exciting patch changes because patch 8.3 has been announced. Now keep in mind there's probably going to be a couple of months before we really get to see patch 8.3 or go live, so the changes here are very early. A lot of the numbers will be adjusted. There's probably going to be a lot of different iterations of changes. Don't look at the percentages, don't look at the numbers, that's my disclaimer. Look at Blizzard's intent. If Blizzard wants a certain talent to be viable, then they'll probably try and make it viable. Maybe the first iteration of changes is going to be too small of a change. So they'll go and look at the data and they'll change it. But the basic note is that if Blizzard wants a talent to be viable, it'll probably become viable for the next patch. So first of all, you can see here the class changes. There are multiple healer changes, some really big healing changes happening. But the general note here in the developers note is that in terms of DPS classes, they're nerfing the dot classes to a certain extent because they don't want the dot classes to really be head and shoulders above every other DPS on fights where there are multiple adds. Maybe that is a direct kind of spoiler to show that the new raid is going to have multiple add bosses. So let's look at these dot class nerfs, and that is going to cover balance druids. Moonfire damage and periodic damage is reduced by 10%, Sunfire damage and periodic damage is reduced by 10%, High Noon Azeroth trait and Power of the Moon Azeroth trait has been increased. So all of a sudden the nerfs here are going to be somewhat insignificant for balanced druid dealing with single target damage, and it's going to scale up the more targets you have. So it's going to be bigger of a nerf if there's like 2 targets, 3 targets, 4 targets. And the same exact thing is happening with Shadow Priest. Shadow Priests are getting far bigger nerf in terms of when big touch damage reduced, Shadow World pain damage reduced, Course of Insanity critical strike bonus reduced by 25, Auspicious Spirit damage reduced by 25. Like there is a lot of nerfs happening to Shadow Priest, and a lot of people will say that it's between 10 to 15% nerf if you compare it to like single target, multiple targets. It's less of a nerf to single target, but it scales up the more targets you have. Now, a lot of people will say that this Moonfire damage nerf or Sunfire damage nerf, will this impact rest of druids? And from what I've read, it's probably not going to impact it. And I'll be talking about this throughout the whole video, because a lot of the times, if a balanced druid Moonfire gets nerfed, rest of druids Moonfire is also nerfed. But this might not be the case. So I'm assuming there is no nerfs to Moonfire to, or Sunfire to rest of druids who are looking to do Mythic Plus and deal damage. Maybe rest of druids will be using more of these Azeroth traits to deal more damage, because they have been buffed. Shadow Priests are dominating. This is Mythic Eternal Palace raid boss DPS. Shadow Priests are dominating this raid in general, especially on these multi-cleave target fights like Queen's Court. Shadow Priests and dot classes are absolutely crazy. So Blizzard is directly taking matters to their own hands. They don't want dot classes to do this much damage. You could argue the balanced druid is probably not the best dot class out there. Like they're still very good, one of the top classes, but you could argue that maybe balance should have received a nerf here. I would love to hear opinions about this. This nerf is somewhat insignificant for balanced druids, not as big as you might think, because Vision of Perfection, the proc rate of Vision of Perfection has been increased by 12%, and this is a big, let's say this is a pretty decent buff to classes that use Vision of Perfection, especially Holy Paladins, and we'll talk about Holy Paladin nerfs. But Vision of Perfection is the most preferred essence for Holy Paladins, and also balanced druids use it as well. So the nerf, like I mentioned, is not as big as might people think. Frost Mage, Iceland's damage has been increased by 20%, and that is to do because Iceland's was kind of falling off in terms of the rotation. So they want mages, specifically Frost Mages, to have a more complex rotation. So Iceland's might be coming back. Now the change here to do with Monks and Brewmasters, stamina bonus reduced, stagger percent is reduced, high tolerance now increases the effectiveness of stagger by 5%, was 8%. This is pretty big changes to Brewmaster, and I guess everyone saw this coming. Brewmaster in this patch has become the best raid tank and the best Mythic Plus tank, or somewhere close to those lines. If you look at the performance of Brewmasters, or at least the number of parses of Brewmasters in Mythic raiding, you can see that Brewmasters are dominating. They're the most popular tanking spec in Mythic Eternal Palace. They're the most popular progression tanking spec. They can be used to cheese boss tactics because stagger is so strong. And the same thing was actually happening in Mythic Plus as well. If we go to the tanking performance, And if we look at, okay, 15 and up is actually pretty decent balance, but if we look at level 20 and up Mythic Plus, the hardest Mythic Plus content you can do in the game right now, you can see that brewmasters are climbing. Now, warriors are still very popular. Warriors were the flavor of the month in the last patch, but they received certain nerfs and things like that to do with damage, and now brewmaster is climbing. So Blizzard is nerfing brewmasters as a response to brewmasters becoming the tank for everything. And it'll be very interesting to see how these changes are going to affect them in the new patch. I am still quite certain that brewmasters are still going to be very popular in raiding. We'll have to see how it's going to work out in Mythic Plus, but again, the intent is clear. They don't want a single tanking spec, be best at everything. And then we go to the Mistweaver changes, and the Mistweaver changes honestly are the most fun changes I've seen. And these changes, like, don't get me wrong, this will probably change the gameplay, but it might not make Mistweavers do more healing. It might not give them extra HPS. This is purely, like, it's very early stages, but this is almost like purely a gameplay change. So Rising Mist healing increased by 30% and now extends heal overtime effects by 3 seconds and was 2 seconds before. Now, I made a video like 3 days ago about Mistweavers, and I spent like 3 minutes ranting about how Rising Mist could have had or could have introduced a new gameplay to Mistweavers. And this has a possibility of adding a new Fistweaving build, and a proper Fistweaving build where Rising Mist might be popular. Who knows, maybe Spirit of the Crane is going to be a choice as well. And all of a sudden you'll be a Fistweaver or Mistweaver who'll have to do DPS in order to heal. So that is very, very cool. I do not know how these numbers are going to affect their HPS. I don't know if it's going to increase their healing. It might be on par with the Upwelling build in raids. But Rising Mist will provide a different playstyle. So I'm very, very excited about the prospect of a new playstyle. And this playstyle is so different. It's almost like a new class being brought in, because your Rising Sun Kick, every reset is going to increase the healing. It's going to extend the duration of your HOTS. So all of a sudden you want to get more Rising Sun Kicks. Maybe haste is going to become more important because you can lower the cooldown of your DPS abilities with haste. Maybe mastery is going to dip a little bit lower because you'll be hitting the boss instead of using your Vivifies. We'll have to see. But the prospect of a completely new build for Mistweavers is definitely here. Maybe the 30% increase to Rising Mist is not going to be enough. That's what I mean. Look at the intent. Blizzard wants Rising Mist to become a viable talent. So I'm excited for Mistweavers the most because a new playstyle. It might not be better in terms of HPS, or it'll be on par in terms of HPS, but who cares? I want to try out a new playstyle for Mistweaver because I've been pretty bored of it for a little bit. And the developers notice that the talent is currently overshadowed on its own row, and we want to make sure it's competitive enough to make its unique playstyle a viable option. Best change so far that I've seen out of these changes here. Windwalkers as well received a buff. Rising Sun Kick damage increased, Blackout Kit damage increased as well. Now Windwalkers were waiting for this change for a really long time. This, from what I've read, is not going to affect Mistweavers. So the Rising Sun Kick damage is not gonna be increased for Mistweavers. I've seen the damage aura amplification, or the way the damage auras are handled between different specs. There's been some changes to that. So I'm not 100% sure, but this will not impact Mistweavers, even though Mistweavers want more damage, and that's one of their big issues, dealing more damage. But Windwalkers have been pretty bad in terms of DPS. This is Queen's Court, but if you go to all the bosses, Windwalkers have definitely been one of the lower DPS specs, and I know a lot of Windwalkers will want this change and they can't wait for this change. Any buffs are very, very needed. So now we go to Holy Paladins, and this is the biggest change. A lot of people have been asking me about this. Like, I mean, a lot of people. And that is Holy Paladin and Glimmer of Light may now be applied to a maximum of 8 targets. This is super weird. Straight up, this is super weird because why 8 targets? It's like giving Discipline Priest a limit on atonements. It's like giving Rest of Druids a limit on rejuvenation. Or it's a weird change overall, but I can see why they did this. They didn't want to nerf Holy Paladins in Mythic Plus content, but they wanted to nerf them in raiding. And the same thing is going to happen with Discipline Priest, and I'll talk about that later on. But this change is directly going to affect mainly Holy Paladins with Glimmer of Light doing raid content and using Holy Avenger and Wings. So basically, if you don't have cooldowns available as a Holy Paladin with Glimmer of Light, you usually don't have 8 targets with Glimmer of Light. You might not even have 8 targets. But once you pop your cooldowns and you pop this super cooldown, Holy Avenger and Wings, and this, you're pumping now. You can get up to like 15 glimmers of light on the raid if you have Divine Purpose procs, if you get a little bit lucky. So all of a sudden, that burst is going to be directly impacted because you can only do maximum of 8 targets. Now, I've tested the PTR, and the way that it works, and again, this is pretty weird, is that I was trying to get as 8 targets with Glimmer of Light, and once I'm attacking the 9th target, I want to apply Glimmer on that 9th target. If I do it, the target that I applied Glimmer first, that Glimmer disappears. It's just gone. And this also affects enemy targets. So all of a sudden, if you're a type of Holy Paladin who puts Glimmer of Light on the enemy target like a boss or in Mythic Plus, all of a sudden that is going to count towards your 8 maximum limit. So you have to make a choice between, do I want to keep a Glimmer on the boss, or do I want to actually keep Glimmer on the targets need to be healed? Now, how does this affect raiding in Mythic Plus? This is pretty significant nerf in terms of Holy Paladin raid performance, especially when you use your Holy Avenger and Wings together. This might, again, this is purely speculation. Maybe in raids as a Holy Paladin, you'll stagger your cooldowns. Maybe you won't use Holy Avenger and Wings together. Maybe you'll use them separately, because you can't put out 15 or 20 glimmers anymore anyways. It all is going to depend on the damage patterns of the new raid. It's all about the damage patterns. And again, in Mythic Plus, this doesn't really have a lot of effect if you really think about it. Blizzard thought about this. In Mythic Plus, you probably won't have 8 glimmers. Even if there's like 4 mobs attacking you right now and you want to have glimmers on all those 4 mobs, like at the end of the day, a lot of paladins in Mythic Plus content stagger Holy Avenger and Wings anyways. They don't use that one big cooldown. They stagger it. So a lot of the times they don't even have 8 glimmers. So that's why I say this change is directly made. Hey, we don't want to touch Glimmer of Light in Mythic Plus, but we want to limit Holy Paladins in raids. So overall, I still feel Holy Paladins are going to be very strong healers. At the end of the day, it's one of the healers that do not have any mana issues. Crusader Strike did not have a mana component associated with it, which I thought was the way that Blizzard was going. Holy Paladins can still do damage while healing. They still want to do that Holy Shock resets with Crusader Strike. Maybe Glimmer is going to be reduced. Holy Paladins still have damage reduction cooldowns with Devotion Aura. They probably will still be one of the top healers for the new raid, but their burst healing is definitely going to be changed. And we'll have to see how the haste components is going to be affected in terms of stacking haste, which is going to be very, very interesting. If you look at the healing performance, look at Holy Paladins. This is 75 percentile. If you look at 99 percentile, Holy Paladins are like massively ahead. So this nerf will probably bring them in line with the other healers. It'll still probably make Holy Paladins as one of the top healers, but not by this amount. So that's what Blizzard was trying to kind of look at. So if we go to Discipline Priest changes, and this is very interesting as well. Atonement healing reduced by 50% was 55. This is pretty big because atonement healing is the #1 source in raiding situations. But Mastery Grace effectiveness increased by 12%. So this is, again, another approach. Let's kind of not touch Discipline Priest in Mythic Plus, but let's nerf Discipline Priest in raiding scenarios. So this atonement healing reduction is going to be a raid healing nerf, because in raids you'll most likely be putting as many atonements as you can, and then you'll be using your DPS burst, schism and things like that to heal the people with atonement. In Mythic Plus, you'll probably be using more of your single target healing, like Shadow Mend and things like that, to get your tank up, get your DPS up from really low HP. Because if you look at the Mastery Grace, your healing and absorption is increased by 10% on the targets with atonement. Now, some of the tooltips are not 100% correct here, but basically in Mythic Plus, if you have more Mastery is going to become more interesting, more powerful, and if you're doing more single target healing with people with atonements, it's going to be doing more healing. Your Master is going to be doing more healing, which is, pretty cool when you're doing 5-man content. But in raids, this is a direct nerf to raid healing. It's not a significant nerf to raid healing. This is, I think that Discipline Priests are probably going to be looking at this and saying, hey, we're probably going to be the top healers if the changes go like this. Holy Paladin was nerfed significantly. It's still probably going to be pretty strong. But Discipline was not really touched that much. And Discipline was always very strong, not because of its healing, but because of its damage absorption and things like that. So all of a sudden, Discipline is looking in a good position, or at least from these changes, they're still looking very strong. Arguably, Discipline might be looking as one of the best progression raid healers if the changes go like this. And Holy Paladins are looking to be, you know, probably second best if you're looking at the toolkit that Holy Paladins provide. And Mistweaver is going to be really hard to tell, but definitely a different playstyle is coming to Mistweaver. Now there's also an Affliction change where Deadbolt has now deals 20% of total remaining damage of the Warlock's damage. Overtime effects on the target was 30%. Now this is pretty obvious, because if you look at Affliction Warlocks in raiding situations, they're basically all picking Deadbolt. So Deadbolt has been, they want Deadbolt or that hero to be more competitive. So the overall changes, again, this is very early to say, but I'm most excited about Mistweaver new playstyle that could be emerging. I really want to try out proper Fistweaving build. It might be very cool. Glimmer of Light nerf, again, focused on nerfing raid and leaving Mythic Plus kind of the same. The same thing with Priests. We'll have to see how it's going to turn out, but the 8 maximum target Glimmer tax is definitely looking weird, and I might make a video looking into Glimmer nerfs more while I'm doing more testing on PTR. Let me know, guys, how you feel about all of these changes. Should your class have been changed? Should your class have gotten some buffs on nerfs? Maybe you feel left out. Maybe certain healers shouldn't have received these nerfs. How do you feel about this? Again, at the end of the day, a lot of this is speculation, and a lot of these numbers will change. The intent is the key. Blizzard wants this to happen, and they probably will make this happen. So let me know how you feel about this. Thank you for watching this video, and are you excited for patch 8.3? Because I am. Build the hype. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in my next guide.